Okay, here we go down the road trying to figure out, is there a root cause for sexual orientation? Now, this is from the American Psychological Association. This goes way back to 2008, and even back to 1975, they were discussing this issue about how to take away the stigma of being in one of these other groups of, bisexual, transsexual, and so forth. Now, what they're talking about here primarily is, and listen to this carefully, listen carefully what they say, the prejudice and discrimination that people who identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual regularly experience, and they do, there's no question about that. The prejudices they regularly experience have been shown to have negative psychological effects. Negative psychological effects. Is that because of being exposed to all prejudices and just feeling put upon and then they get depressed and so forth, negative psychological effects? Or are those negative psychological effects caused by the gut microbiome? Because that does happen. No question whatsoever. The gut microbiome affects your mood. All right, this is important to understand. They can find no genetic cause. There's no gene. There's no straight gene. There's no gay gene. There's no special gene that determines what your sexual outcome is going to be. So let's start from that and see what will determine it. Wow. I have been saying that the microbiome is literally the keys to everything in your life. How you feel, your happiness, your unhappiness, your health, your immunities, everything, literally everything. How you develop, your weight, resistance to diseases. However, here's something I had not considered. Ethical issues in fecal microbiota transplants, taking into account identity and family relations. Well, guess what? They have found that fecal matter by transplants can change your sexual identity. Okay, my friends. As you know, at Mudfossil University, there is no subject that is off the table or untouched. None, zero. Controversy is just a daily way of doing business here. Now, let's talk about being gay. All right, that's a little bit controversial. Is that a problem? Is that a defect? Or is that just nature's way? And is there an increase in this, or is this just something that has been in the closet, kept under covers? People have felt this way all along, and there has been no changes in the psychological makeup that has all of these different variations of sexual spectrum propensities, and how you react to different sexes, and what chemistry in you, because that's me, chemistry, I do chemistry. This is a chemical reaction. Everything in your body is chemistry, 100%. I don't care what it is. When you think, when you're happy, when you're unhappy, when you have disease, when you have infections, when you have inflammation, 100% chemistry. And they have found that the microbiome and its bacterial enzymes, these are the little bits and pieces of chemistry that react instantly to create the chemistry in your body required for you just to barely walk and stand and eat and talk and have energy and break down your food and attack your invaders. These are the things that do this, is your bacteria. Now, they give off chemistry that really is the orchestrator of your entire life. That chemistry makes you do what you do. And if the chemistry's not working right, you can have all kinds of disorders. Now, I am going to go, like I say, this is a very controversial issue, and people that have these feelings, I don't know how they feel, to be perfectly honest with you, about society's reactions to their situation. Whatever it is, gay, transsexual, they have a huge spectrum. As a matter of fact, they're going to have to add more letters to the alphabet if they keep going on. LGBTQs and so forth. My point is, this is a complete spectrum, just like autism. I studied autism too, and that has the same situation. It's caused by chemistry. Now, either you have the chemistry that sends you your hormone activity into wanting a different sex, or finding the similar sex attractive, or finding both sex attractive, or just being a sex fanatic, whatever it is. That's chemistry. I don't care how you cut it. It doesn't matter. So, is the person that has an insane sexual desire, let's go with that, insane sexual desire, above all other desires, it's so important that it really, you can do crazy, stupid things. And believe me, I was in that situation when I was young. It was stupidity, and but there was some kind of hormone thing going on. It was pretty obvious in my case. So, and I had a lot of other issues too. Everybody has issues. So there's nobody that's squeaky clean here. Was my general issues due to my diet, and it could be. That's what I have been finding. If you go through the microbiome, that is the one thing in your body that keeps you alive, that does your immune system, it feeds you, it cleans you, it does everything for you, and it's done by bacteria. And if you don't have the bacteria, you will not have the chemistry that bacteria puts out, which is called an enzyme. And if you don't have that enzyme, or you have too many of one certain enzymes and not enough of another, you could easily go all kinds of different directions with your emotional state, because it drives people literally. You can have all kinds of, from autism to Alzheimer's to Parkinson's, every single neurological disease. And I believe the sexual attraction is a neurological function. It is. I am going to take that as an assumption. It's not it's a neurological function. It could be genetic. I can't say it's not, but I don't think it is. And as a matter of fact, they say there's no gene that points to sexual desire one way or the other, as far as I know. And I'm digging in, I'm just really getting pretty started on this, because I've noticed every time you turn on the TV, almost half the people now seem to be gay. And, openly, and it's, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, well, and I'm seeing a lot of them are dressed up like women that are men, and men that are dressed up like women, and back and forth, and all kinds of different things. And there seems to be a bubbling up of emotions somewhere in the human psyche right now. What's causing that? I don't know. Are there changes? I don't know. Are they happening only in certain geographical areas in the world? I don't know. Is there something that we can test to see if there's a difference in the microbiomes of different groups of people? And can we test them as they develop in age? Very simple test. Fecal matter swab. What's in the bacteria as they grow? And does one go this way and one go that way? The bacteria changes. And a lot of it is antibiotics have changed the guts of all kinds of people. And, that's a real serious issue to talk about antibiotics. You know, you need them for certain conditions, absolutely. But then you got to replace the good bacteria. They don't just come in and say, oh, you're a bad bacteria, I'm going to kill you. No, they come in and say, oh, you got any bacteria on there? And they do a minigun through the whole thing, 30,000 shots a second. Done. And all your bacteria is gone. What are you going to do then? You're not creating the enzymes. So anyway, I'm relating this, I know it's turning into a ramble here, but I'm going to relate this to bacteria. Let's see what the research shows. They've done some research on it. It's not much. They just don't do research on things. I can't imagine where all this research money's going. I see no research to speak of. I see a lot of... Anyway, another issue at Mudfossil University that we do not shy away from. All right, let's get started on the gay spectrum. See what it's all about. All right, listen to this carefully. Gut microbiota and sexual desire, libido. Some studies link this with diversity and factors like hormone levels, stress, anxiety, all that stuff affects, you know, how you feel, basically. And they say that affects how you have a sexual desire. Now, but listen to this. This is the key. Fecal matter transplant means you put somebody else's bacteria. This is just bacteria. That's all it amounts to, is the bacteria. You put that into another person's digestive system, and they now start processing the digestion just like the other person would, because now they have their bacteria. The bacteria is the only thing that does anything in your body, basically, because it creates enzymes. Enzymes break down the food and build the proteins. Here's what happened when they gave females. They took one study of mice, found that FMT from adult males, the fecal matter transplant from an adult male into females, resulted in higher testosterone levels, which drives you to be more male. Strictly from the fecal matter transplant. What was different in that one than the other one? There had to be some other bacteria in there that leads to more maleness. It just has to be. There's no other conclusion you can have. All right, this is important. This is from the American Journal of Bioethics from Volume 17, 2017, Issue 5. This is 8 years ago, talking about the issues with fecal matter transplants and about regulating them and policy making, all this stuff. They say, we agree that these are indeed urgent issues that need to be dealt with, especially considering the newness, novelty, and the promises of FMT as a new therapeutic intervention, for literally for anything, rapidly becomes more mainstream. Well, this is 8 years ago, and it's not mainstream, you can't have it, it's against the law. Now, there's two other urgent things. This other nonsense was about concern, ethical this and that. This is something that I do consider important to understand. It says, we argue two other important issues addressed by MA and colleagues only in passing require serious ethical concern. And this need to be attention by the policymakers and regulatory bodies. These regard the possible consequences of FMT, personal identity, wait till you hear this, and family relations, which are addressed by recent studies. And this is only recent studies in 2016. That's 9 years ago. And the reason is that when you get a new bacteria in you, it can actually change your sexual identity. They found out first, regard to personal identity, colleagues do address sexual identity. They found out that putting male transplant into a female in mice made them produce more testosterone. So whatever was in the guts of the male microbiome, when put into the female, made them start to produce more maleness, which would turn them, I would guess, more gay. So there is something serious here going on in the gut. And it covers every single disease there is. If you put it in and say, autism, well, let's watch this. Autism and fecal matter transplant. Let's see what it has to say. All right, this goes back quite a ways, and they knew about the impact of the fecal matter transplants, and this is what their objection is, because it can change your personality, and your personality can change how you affect within your family, but it can also change your sexual identity, as far as I'm concerned. And here's what it says here. It says, the approach has major implications not only for how we perceive ourselves, but also for the impact of FMT on personal identity. It changes you. Changing the microbiome by means of FMT implies changing the interaction between a patient's human and microbe genome. The two of them together work as two independent units. You got your human body that is driven by the microbiome, and if you don't have the right enzymes to do the right impulses and nerves and build the right structures and all that, something's gonna be different here. So if you add new microbes and you start changing things over here, you're gonna be literally a different person. And this is what they're talking about, personal identity. This I didn't take into account. I wasn't even thinking along these lines. Now it says changing the microbe by means of FMT implies changing the interaction between the human and the microbe, and therewith changing the metagenome. And metagenome means how you react, and how the different genome in your body is nothing more than programs. They're just nothing more than programs. And there's a pretty good set of normal programs, which is just a normal gene set. And they can't find any gene that determines sexual identity at all. So it's not a gene. However, you get the changes in this FMT and you get changes in your genome, your microbiome. It affects how you feel about everything and how you start producing things depending upon what the makeup of the bacteria is. All right, so it has a huge impact on not only your well-being. You know, it appears to cure almost anything. That's what they're saying, or not necessarily cure. And I never recommend anything for anybody, so this is just strictly research. But they say it needs more research. It's basically every single time they say that. But it has a huge positive, possibility. Let's just go with that. I'm not saying anything fixes anything, but this fecal matter transplant, they've known about this for a very, very long time, only they're throwing all these ethical considerations into there. And I do understand now, I really didn't consider this, but you would have to have the correct bacteria from the correct age person and the correct sex, and have that good, healthy bacteria if you want to be not harmfully affected by a sexual orientation, I would guess. You see this? They want to draw attention to the issue of families in FMT. To begin with, possible changes in personal identity. You just feel different. You're literally a different person once you get the correct bacteria in you. Now, so you might be able to get bad bacteria in you. I don't know. But this is something we need a database to find out. Is this people always feel frustrated, they're always angry, they're always tense, and they may have a high level of some bacteria in you that creates the enzyme that does that chemistry. Feelings as well as physical symptoms, cancer and Alzheimer's and all these things are going to float along this bacteria line. And there's going to be a norm. And if you're up here or you're down here, that would probably be something you want to consider, because everybody else is here and they're healthy, and you're up here and you're frustrated, you're angry, and you're constipated or whatever it is. And it's always going to have something to do with the digestive system, because that's where we're working, is in the digestive system. And what you poop out and in the feces, the fecal matter transplant, is the bacteria. And from a very healthy donor, you normally will get very healthy bacteria. But there's a lot of nuance here that people don't consider. Yeah, just a new poop and everything's fine. No, it has to be. I believe now, seeing all of the little bits and pieces, studying this for over 10 years, this has to be, there's some critical issues that have to be dealt with that address these possible changes in your actual, personal identity. They're talking about family relationships. Actually, maybe you just changed. You don't like your wife anymore or something, I don't know. I have no idea. But I do know that everything in you, 100% in you, in me, and every living creature is only done because of an enzyme. And that requires a bacteria to create that enzyme. That's where the fecal matter transplant is. You could call this bacterial transplant. This fecal matter makes it sound nasty. It's bacterial transfer. Now, if we could isolate these different bacteria, we could certainly manufacture them. But there is no patent you can get on these manufactured bacteria. Plus, they're easily recreated and they're inexpensive and they fix everything. So it harms every bit of the pharmaceutical industry and doctors and everything, because this is going to help people. We're still going to need all those things and delivery devices and how to react with this, but this is an intrusion to business. And trust me, the healthcare system is a very, very huge business, and it employs a lot of people, and it's growing fast. Last I saw, it was like, well, hold on a second. Let's see how fast it is growing. All right, this is healthcare, and it's growing very fast, faster than other industries. Growth may moderate slightly compared to the other previous decades because it's been just growing like crazy. It still outpaces other sectors, projected 9.0% growth rate. Specific job growth. All right, these are all the different problems. Listen to this. National health care expenditures reached 4.9 trillion. National health care expenditures reached 4.9 trillion in 2023, an increase of 7.5% from 2022. Wow. Specific areas of growth: spending on prescribed drugs, hospital care, physicians. We needed these fecal matter transplants looked into quickly. What to expect in 2025 healthcare and beyond. It's growing very, very, very quickly. This is just unbelievable. I've been studying the microbiome, and I know that the bacteria in your gut, and it's strictly the bacteria, create the enzymes. I had not considered the fact that having these new enzymes could affect your actual sexual preferences. But they did know about this way back in 2008 or 9 or so. They'd like to draw attention to the issue of families in FMTs. To begin with, possible changes in personal identity, which means your sexual identity, may have consequences for family relationships. This is all about how the microbiome actually changes you in many different ways other than just getting healthy, which it does. They make you very healthy because you get new bacteria, which does the breaking down and the building up and all that. So they're saying, although diseases such as inflammation, bowel disease, Clostridium difficile, other gastrointestinal diseases pose significant economic social burdens, not only to affected patients, but also to their families. The question is whether treatment of these diseases by FMT justifies the risk of changing a family's microbiome. You're just fixing it up so that it's got the good bacteria, which might have long-term consequences that are in any case for the time being difficult to oversee. So they're saying we don't know what happens. You give them new bacteria. All you are doing is taking bacteria from a healthy person's digestion, is the thing that digests the food, and putting it into somebody else. Now, if they had issues before, this should fix the issues, in a physical sense, but also in a mental sense as well, because all of the mental issues that you have are also from chemistry. They're not just mental floating around, I'm unhappy about life. Usually, your body makes you unhappy about life, and it comes out as a feeling. Now, so in some, they argue that FMT may have far-reaching consequences, which it does, for identity. Far-reaching consequences for identity. Who are you? When you get healthy, who are you? And family relationships. FMT may change a person's biology, behavior, mood, and affect the people living with him or her psychologically, physiologically, and socially. This is what they're talking about. It's giving them good bacteria. That's just like saying, don't take antibiotics because they can change you. And they do. Absolutely, 100%. Because you've killed off good bacteria and bad bacteria. But so it's just unbelievable that they have taken this approach. Thus, a strictly individual approach to the ethics of FMT does not suffice. Identity and family aspects should be taken into account. So you're changing the whole world by giving somebody else this bacteria. This is what they're talking about. It's like starting a whole new races of people. No, it's by giving them the bacteria that they've been getting killed by the contaminants. And that's why we're getting worse and worse and worse sick. And the sexual identity is changing. I can see it. I don't know if they've been hiding in a closet all this long, but right now they're just everywhere. All kinds of different sexual identities, a full spectrum. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this is 100% chemistry. And I'd love to see the bacterial signatures. Like I say, they gave these mice male feces into the females, and they started producing testosterone. What was in that male feces bacteria that was not in the females to start with? Because the bacteria is the only thing that's going to create the enzymes. The enzymes create the chemistry. The chemistry goes in and determines all kinds of things, your health issues, your membranes, what's transferring in and out of you, all the different bacteria and secretions in your body, your hormones. Everything is affected by the microbiome, 100%. See, this is why a lot of kids are getting sick. Antibiotics widely prescribed and administered in preterm neonates, and it destroys their just starting to function immune system. And then they have no immunities to a lot of things that can damage them right from the beginning. And a lot of this relates to making the very fine sheathing, the myelin sheathing that coats the nerves. There's something to do in that area. And I'm not sure exactly what. I think it might have something to do with sulfur. And I don't want to make any comments about that. I don't know. But it's got something to do with the chemistry that surrounds those membranes somewhere in this here. Sulfur, silicon, phosphorus. This is what makes membranes. And this is where I would concentrate the research on. What are we missing? What bacteria is missing when we don't have sulfur there? Or what bacteria is excessive when we have too much sulfur? Whatever. The bacteria are what create all of those chemistry, 100%. You see this? I'm going to conclude it here. But I asked, do we need a fecal database, a fecal bacteria database to test for enzymes? And this is the response. It says, yes, we do. We need a fecal bacteria database. Can be helpful, but it's not strictly necessary for testing for enzymes. What we need it for is to compare the enzymes from one person to another person to the norm. So they're saying, yes, you can get your database, you can go and collect enzymes, you don't have to have a database. Well, we need a database to be able to decide what's too much, what's too little, and that will all level out according to symptoms. And if you have everybody basically that has colorectal perforations is real high on this particular bacteria, well, certainly you want to see, could you change that? Could you supplement that? Could you give them the enzymes that are produced by that bacteria? I think you could do any of all of those. But you have to have the bacteria that produce the enzyme. If you don't, you're done. All right, I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm hoping RFK Jr. will contact me, and all I'm asking for is a database, and we could have that up and running within a couple of weeks. We just have, make sure that everybody's getting the babies tested for the fecal swab immediately on birth, and then every week or so until we get a good database going. And then we find out, what's normal. And then hopefully at some point we can get somebody who's, using a cell phone. We just click with an app that takes the picture of the feces, sends it off, analyzes it through AI, and with literally seconds, you have a diagnosis, and if there's any issues or whatever the case is. But at least you know what bacteria is in your body, because they are the things that produce the enzymes. Without the enzymes, not a single thing in your body happens. Almost nothing whatsoever. Because even all the electrical signals in your body are required synapses. That's energy. All right, that takes a bacteria creating an enzyme, doing this click chemistry. It's unbelievable how fast they can create energy. So I'd like to be involved in this. Like I said, we have this big study going on overseas, and it looks like it's going somewhere now. So anyway, Secretary Kennedy, I am at your disposal.